Do we have any?
We have Dean Loader and Matt sitting.
Okay, so yes, okay, sitting in the Dean, thank you. And any declarations of interest that are not already recorded, please? Thank you. I have no announcements, so I'll go straight into point 4, the previous minutes from the 26th of July, starting on page 3 of your pack. I will take it as the matters arising as we go through. So anything on page 3, please. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. I just pick up on that Director of Communications. The commissioners were extremely pleased with the number of applications we received for that post, and we look forward to making an appointment in due course. Alison, do we know where we've got dates for that?
Yes, we're interviewing on Monday and Tuesday of next week.
Okay, thank you. Page 7. Page 8. And page 9. Okay, thank you. So moving on to point 5, update on outstanding actions. Item number 5, there are currently no items to be discussed. Is there anything that needs to be raised at the meeting live, please?
From my perspective, no.
No? Okay. In that case, let's get down to the substantive part of the meeting, revenue monitoring report, please, Lisa.
Morning, Chair. So this is the first monitoring report you're going to receive from us for this financial year.
Yeah.
You've already seen the outturn, which closed off last year. We brought in the summer, and this is the first update since budget set in the 12th of February.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're probably familiar with the report format at this point in time. There is a narrative explanation about the changes since budget setting.
Yeah.
And we've also got Appendix 1, which provides an overview of the budget and what the underspend position is. And what this report is presenting to you is there's a £1.7 million overspend on the annual budget, and I'll go through how we are going to finance that at the end.
Okay.
Appendix 2 presents a reserve table, which goes some way to explain the former point I made. It funds some of those overspends and gives you a year-end position, and that is the cornerstone of our financial planning.
Yeah.
And Appendix 3 details grant-funded initiatives and the impact on the revenue budget. So any overs or unders there can actually empty out into our annual budget. Appendix 4 is new, and that has arisen through a request from Kirsty with agreement from commissioners in terms of presenting an overview of what the unbudgeted spend is,
yes,
costs of commissioner decisions and the transformation programme. So it's all the extras that, you know, the organisation is looking to put in place to improve, and that's a new appendix.
Yes.
So just coming back to the main piece, this presents an overspend of 1.658. That's quite significant. There's an £120,000 overspent on employee budgets, and there is 1.6 on non-employee budgets, and that falls over a number of areas. This is offset by a small amount of additional income. So employee costs, there's 120,000 overspend, not a huge number in the scheme of things, but I thought it was important to present to you the detail of that, and you can see that in paragraph 2.21. There's a 925,000 overspend on full-time salary costs. Yeah. There's a 1.074 million underspend on call. Yeah. So those two are almost setting each other off. We've got an overspend on corporate salaries and also on commissioners. Now there's a few more overs and unders that are adding to the overall 120 position, Lady Wilcox. What I've done there, I've picked up the main pieces just to look at. So those are the focal points. And I've provided a narrative underneath. So you can understand better what's going on in the service. So 925 overspend, it sort of goes some way to explain when we set the budget, there's timing issues with all information being known at budget setting.
Of course.
One of those being pay awards. We budgeted for 3%. It ended up at 4%.
Yes.
So 300,000 of that 925 is down to that pay differential.
Yes, yes.
Don't like the way I worded the second bit actually, but what I'm trying to say with the use of HMIC FRS example is the remaining 600,000 would be down to extras. Extras will fall over a number of categories. That will be cover for sickness, suspensions, projects, promotions, things like that. And you are aware there is a number of gaps throughout the organisation.
Yes, indeed.
And some transformational work that we need to undertake that are adding to that position.
Yes.
So that's the whole time bit there. Moving on to on-call duty system, I mean, it's quite self-explanatory. We budget 200% capacity with a vacancy factor. We are not hitting 100% at this moment in time. And that's where that £1 million underspend is coming from. Efforts are in place to turn that around. We are making every effort to get bums on seats with our retained on-call staff. And then that is offset slightly by the same pay award, which affects whole time.
There is with the on-call duty system, there is an issue about numbers within that team, I believe, in terms of not enough. Am I
not aware?
No.
Yes, Lady Wilcox. So basically, obviously, Mark has raised concerns regarding that, and I've sat with Mark now, and I believe we could probably reshape that team within the current establishment as well around some of the positions. So obviously, looking at some of the positions and changing them to meet the needs of what that looks like. I think the bit for us is now I've just come back from an NFCC conference on the on-call.
Okay.
And I think there's probably a bit of work there that we need to do and bring to yourselves and the CFO around what's the future of on-call for South Wales.
Yes.
As well, and how does that align to national changes as well?
I think that's a really good position to be in because I think, we've got anomalies in all parts of the system, I think, in all individual brigades. And I think that I just, I heard the health minister this morning talking about the way to improve things was to bring all the health boards on board with the changes at the same time. And I think the same, applies to other public services, and fire is one of them, where if there are national advantages of doing something that, do you know what I mean? So we've got I think it's a really important lesson for us, for every aspect of the service, that we need to be doing what is best practice. I was always of the mind, why do we reinvent the wheel when other people are doing stuff elsewhere? You know what I mean? Good stuff elsewhere. So I think, although that doesn't directly impact upon your report, Lisa, I think this is the place for me to, to raise stuff so that to make you aware that there's the other parts that are going on in the organisation, but that national thing, I'm very, very keen to that we follow that up. Thank you.
I think that it may be worth saying at that point there is more work needs to be done on that aspect, isn't it? Yes. And we wouldn't be looking to add to the cost base for the transformation.
I knew you'd say that, and that's what a good head of finance should tell me. Do not add to the cost base.
So until we've got something set out in black and white, there'll be no hard and fast decisions there with it.
Yeah. No.
Which is probably why I didn't know.
Good gatekeeping, Lisa. Well done.
Sorry, Lisa, before you interrupt, you started hand.
Thank you. Yes, Stuart.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. And it was just to touch on the point of on-call numbers and availability of on-call staff. And as you rightly point out, it is a national problem. It's a problem which every fire and rescue service that employs on-call firefighters suffers with across the country, and it's a highly complex, multifaceted problem. There's no sort of silver bullet to this, and this is a challenge that the services around the country have been wrestling with for many years. I think that where we are making progress is in terms of some of the national activity to tap into the NFCC groups around on-call availability and learning from each other. And there's sort of lots of that work going on in the background. And one of the sort of the big drivers from my perspective and what we've been trying to do here is around removing barriers to on-call availability, because we don't have a problem with recruitment. What we do have a problem with is retention. So people come into the service and then it's not necessarily what they thought it was going to be in terms of their commitment and the equipment requirements and how busy they are and so on, and so they subsequently leave. And we're working through ways in which we can sort of improve that understanding from the outset, as well as then looking at ways in which we can make the process more family friendly. Greater number of people doing fewer hours, for example, being the way forward, which ends up being cost neutral in the end. So there's a variety of different work streams going on, just to give some reassurance really that there's lots going on in this space to understand what's going on nationally and locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that explanation. And I think it's a wider question. I certainly think that the world has changed post-pandemic. Certainly in terms of working from home, and although I know that this week the government has announced, the UK government has announced plans to look at 4-day working weeks, and working from home as a teacher. I mean, I was a teacher for 35 years, and in the last couple of years of those 35, they allowed you to go home at a free period, and I had a free period on a Friday afternoon, and I felt as if I'd been released. It was just because your feet were nailed to the floor of a school, you could not leave, and just that slight change made all the difference. It was just incredible. I just wish I'd had it for the previous 30 odd years, but I think in the context of that, Stuart, life has changed so much for people's working conditions. So I think across the public services, notwithstanding fire, we need to have a review and a revision, because we need people, but retention, as in teaching, huge retention rate problem after 5 years. People just don't stay. So we need to look at ways to make life better for our workforce, notwithstanding the huge demands that being a firefighter places upon people, of course, because it's an extremely demanding and important role. And we are so grateful for you. Blimey, there we are. Okay, so Lisa, back to you.
The next section, so we've boxed off full-time on-call duty system staff and now corporate staff, and most of the corporate variances are explained in Appendix 4. They relate to our transformation agenda, our HR restructure, cover for long-term absences. So an offset in that is some vacancies. I think the important thing to say about that area of that category of staff is the pay awards haven't been agreed.
Okay.
Al shared something in the summer in regards to it's looking like as if it could be a flat rate again of 1.290.
Yeah.
Probably won't be received very well
No.
from the unions.
No.
I think we've had 2 against, 1 for it, haven't we?
Yes.
So we've got to wait and see what that pay award actually turns out as, because that may affect,
Of course.
that forecast again, and will give us a variance. So
Yes.
we wait and see with that area. Commissioner's costs, it is what I've explained it to be. No more to be said about that.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that the cost of additional posts, 975, captured in Appendix 4.
Yeah.
And we've got arrangements in place to finance those bits. Other than salaries, we've got fallout in pensions. We budget slightly different for pensions. They're on a more of a live basis, and the assumption was for full recruitment intakes throughout the year. It's actually resulted in 2, so that's got some savings there, because of course you've got exiting of retirement staff, and that's quite a big number, 357, that underspend. So these underspends on pensions are offsetting the overspends up above in the salary areas. So they balance in each other out, which is why you coming back to this 120,000 overall doesn't look like a scary figure. Actually, when you dip in, they are quite large, some of
Yes.
these changes.
Yes. Yes.
Ill health retirements, no, very much difficult to control. It depends on the health of our employees and the opinions of the independent medical advisor. So quite a big increase there at 202,000. And I've provided explanation. It's about numbers that have gone since we set the budget. Difficult budget to set and difficult budget to manage for those reasons.
Yes.
And the MacLeod and O'Brien reference there, we've got it in our accounts in terms of we may need to start paying out this year. It's still not clear how much and when we will do that.
Yeah.
But it's an aid memoir for commissioners and stakeholders to look at and know where we are with potential changes.
Yes. Yes.
So the big ticket items on non-employee areas are, you got premises, and we touched on Firelink during.
Sorry, can I just go back to that previous? I'm sorry, I should have interrupted earlier. It's just, you know, in terms of the changes to the organisation, including, you know, the commissioners, it's just, you know, it's just opposite to note that we, the Fire Authority, has had to bear the costs of that. So there hasn't been any help or input from Welsh Government. And, you know, for the minutes, when there has been intervention in this way previously, let's say in one of the health boards, you know, there has been, you know, a significant amount of money, grant funding, whatever you want to call it, put into the system in order to help to improve. So, you know, we have landed as a result of a Welsh Government decision without any supporting funds. And I think it's important for the public to note that the authority have had to suck up the costs of its own improvement, which, you know, some may say, well, that's fair enough. But I think it's important to note that that is what has happened here. So, you know, and it's certainly something that the commissioners will continue to lobby Welsh Government about.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. So on to the main areas of non-salary spend. We've got premises.
Yeah.
We touched on Firelink in the outturn. Firelink was a national issue that occurred at the end of the last year. As you may recall, they think they may have overcharged us. There's a bit of a debate going on, probably stronger than a debate is the better way to describe it, about whether we get that 425 back or not. We ring fence that in our reserve. So if that bill lands with us this year, which we've assumed there that we would, that will be met from reserves as opposed to in-year budget. We've made an allowance for it, but that is adding up to quite a big variance on premises of that 578,000.
Yes, that's a big chunk. You wouldn't expect premises to be that.
It's not a normal
It's that particular project. Yes,
yeah. So it is about that. It's probably going to result in a court case with, you know, filing charges and Motorola.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the telephone and comms explains itself.
Yes.
That's part of our backup arrangement.
Yes.
If the normal on-call fails us.
Yes.
And then the large places, supplies and services. And I think that, you know, the big area is IT costs.
Yes.
And I'm just recognising that we could take some learning from this, because it's probably something I've read more than once in terms of an IT system has gone into the capital budget, and actually when we've looked in more detail, annual licenses would be more of a revenue issue. Now, it's quite usual for projects to be a mix of capital and revenue. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I think probably what we need to get better at is take some learning from these examples and drill down into the detail when the submission is going in and the budgeting is set.
Yes.
So we always knew about this,
yes,
but it's just moved from capital into revenue. And of course, sometimes that's easier or more difficult to do. We've been able to do it on in this instance.
Yes.
I think that's we will be picking that up when we appoint our new financial accountant, which we've been without for quite some time. They will be looking in more detail at capital submissions and capital plans.
Well, as a former leader of a council, I can tell you how well versed I am in looking at those. I never pretended to understand it because I had experts, thank goodness, around me. But I mean, it's, you know, it is endemic in the public service.
Yeah.
It's capital revenue issue.
Yeah. So that's the biggest piece there that's contributing to that 476. Again, we've got the equipment replacement plan. Now, we've spoken about this in terms of, you know, our budget setting context. 140 is unbudgeted, and the reason it is we've set up a reserve. So there's a financing arrangement down below to fund that.
Yes.
It's wholly, you know, it's planned from that respect because it's on plan submissions, and that supports frontline equipment and ICT stuff. So yeah, everything else sitting there is a much smaller piece. It was the initial IT and equipment replacement plans, and those two things will sit with reserves, which I'll go through at the bottom of the report.
And there are issues about getting the appropriate equipment. Wasn't there something about you can't get certain things now, or things have become obsolete or difficult to source?
I think that if I think about the big equipment plans that we had in place, which was cutting equipment, hydraulics, things like that, I think there was a shift from, is it batteries and manual? I think that was one of the reasons why we would have had a variance. I think we are still experiencing some tightening in supply chains as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
I don't think the world has fully recovered from that.
Yeah.
So that could be why some things are probably taking longer to come in than we would have. Than we'd like. We always want stuff yesterday, don't we?
Yes, but we're okay. Are we operationally? Everything's
Yes.
That the equipment is a priority for us,
Yeah.
which is why we set up £2 million reserve. What that did then, it took the peaks and troughs out of the budget,
Yeah.
so that we can try and gauge an average over a 3-year period of what we need to put in the budget to top up that reserve.
Good.
Because of course that 2 million will be whittling down.
Yes.
As we spend against our investment plans.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Transport, it is what it is, and if I'm honest, I can see that changing because we probably all read in the news about the increase in energy and
Yes.
how things are, you know, world events are impacting that. So we wait and see on that.
Yeah.
Contracted services, again, nearly £500,000 overspend. We know why. HMIC is a large part of that.
Yes.
We've already received a report. There's some strong governance around that now, and that's the biggest piece. The second part of that is consultancy costs, and I think that the biggest piece is specialist employment advice and support for employment tribunals, progressing cases internally, media consultancy, and the recruitment costs for the permanent chief fire officer.
But those bullet point 2 and 3 are now at an end.
2 and 3, so
Yeah.
that's 35 and 48.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. They're not ongoing.
Yeah.
They were one-offs.
Yeah.
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 So-
So the specialist employment advice is ongoing because it has to
Yes.
be, because
Very difficult area
Yeah.
to plan for, isn't it? You don't know what you're going to
Yeah.
get. We'd
Yeah.
rather not spend it, but we
Yeah.
are.
no.
And we are cutting our cloth accordingly then
Yeah.
from some areas to be able
Yeah.
to prop that overspend up.
But I mean, having read the latest judgment, I mean, it's extremely complicated.
It is.
I wouldn't expect anyone other than a specialist lawyer to be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, we're not, and again, so we're not being profligate, again, every public service employs these people because that's why they're specialists.
Yes.
And it's very complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. So Gabby, no disrespect, but
None taken.
it's a buggy pay grade.
Yeah.
I could barely read the report and I'm clever. It was very complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sorry. Yes, Chief, thank you.
Apologies. I probably should shout up if the conversation's moved on. But it was just in relation to the when we were talking about equipment replacement and where we are in relation to that. I think that we have a very well defined pre-planned equipment replacement program for all of our big ticket items of equipment, and that's
Yes.
done in relatively short time scales. Things don't get to the point where they're obsolete and you can't
Okay.
get parts and so on. The only area where I just wanted to flag where that can be challenging is in relation to fleet replacement, because
Okay.
the change time for an appliance, for a fire appliance, is a lot longer, and therefore after 15 years or so, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, then suppliers often move on and stop providing parts. So that can be a challenge for us, and it's something that we continue to keep our eye on through our fleet manager to understand as and when we might need to revisit that in the future around vehicle replacement timelines based on obsolescence of parts of vehicles. But from a firefighting equipment perspective, then that certainly is already pre-planned and it's not a problem for us. But just wanted to highlight really that obsolescence of parts with fire appliances can be a problem for us.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Didn't something happen along those lines with the ones we sent out to Ukraine? Wasn't there an issue that a part had to go out or something? Yeah.
Exactly that. So ultimately, we would have a fire appliance that is beyond its serviceable life with us based on the ability to get parts. It's still working and it's still perfectly functional to donate to other countries that may have a need for it that's greater than ours. But they would be released from our stock as part of that cycle of replacement. But on that occasion, there was a vehicle on its way to Ukraine where there was a part that was faulty, and it was a bespoke part that we'd manufactured ourselves rather than it being a part that was available elsewhere. We were able to respond to that and make that vehicle fit for purpose again to add value to the troubles in Ukraine. But I just wanted to highlight really that we do have a pre-planned program for equipment replacement. That's usually no problem in terms of things like hydraulic cutting equipment, BA sets, PPE, and all of the small equipment. But it can be a challenge with vehicles as they get older, and therefore we just need to keep our eye on how long we have as a replacement program for our vehicles going forward.
Yeah, well, thank you for that explanation, Stuart. That's good to know. It's a shame that the media didn't pick up on that very good work that happened with the Ukraine trip and the guys coming back and taking the bespoke part back. No mention of that in any of the Welsh media, other than the comms we put out on it. Anyway, there we are. So where are we at, Lise?
We're at capital costs,
Okay.
2.26.
Yeah.
There's an overspend reported there, and that is due to the control operating lease, which is financed as part of a reserve arrangements. Kirsty or Commissioner Williams picked that up in our previous meeting. We spoke about it and I explained that there was arrangements. This is the final year of 8 years that we've amortised our operating lease costs for the occupation of the police control into our revenue budget.
Okay, thank you.
Income is a small difference, net small difference, so 17,000. But of course, there's some bigger numbers making that up, and there's some changes there in terms of our cost split with Mid and West for our joint control arrangements. Co-location income is altered, and we've got some reimbursements there. The biggest item of change there, which is offset by the 1, 2 and 3, is the interest, the bank interest, and that's because rates have altered. Now I know that Bank of England have maintained
5%.
Yeah, they've maintained that. I think they're predicting one more reduction before the end of this calendar year. But what that has mean is it's great for borrowing, isn't it? Borrowing is cheaper.
Yes.
Albeit we've already got all our borrowing, so it's new borrowing that would apply to.
Yes.
But investing, the counterpart of that is investing. You're not getting the returns that you thought you would have.
Yes.
And that's what we see in there in the bullet point 4.
Yeah.
So fairly big number, 138, and that's why I think we tend to take quite a prudent approach to budgeting for income, because it's just difficult to control. It's based on market conditions, and
yes.
Especially things like investment income, bank income, things like that.
Yes, yes.
So what all those things add up to is the overspend of 1.7 million.
Yes.
Now, that may look strange in terms of the context of Appendix 4, and I'll walk you through that now in a minute. It says, it presents a picture of £2.2 million unbudgeted spend. So where's the 1.6 or the 1.7 and the 2.2 fit together?
Yes.
What this actually means is, with the budget set, we've got savings in our budget of nearly £500,000 that are offsetting those unbudgeted costs of 2.2 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is down to the gaps that we are holding. It's largely salaries, and that's down to the gaps that we are holding throughout the service.
Okay.
So they are, the in-year budget is servicing to a lesser extent, but unbudgeted overspend.
I got it. Yeah.
So the net amount will come from reserves as opposed to the 2.153.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is why budget monitoring is quite crucial for us, because if we don't have to dip into reserves, we shouldn't, or I wouldn't like to.
Chair, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course,
Back
Brian.
to like one to the income, please. So in terms of income, is it captured within the income, the extensive contribution training will generate through the apprenticeship scheme on the whole-time courses?
Not unless it actually comes into
So
the
once
bank.
it comes in, it will be accounted there, because there'll be significant income coming from that
Good.
on the whole-time course.
Have they spoken with the finance team on picking that up?
No, it's
Is it new?
the apprenticeship scheme. It's not new. The apprenticeship scheme is a certain criteria, certain age. They
Yeah.
can't already work for us. So it's the two external courses, not the on-call conversion.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact figure, but it's thousands of pounds per firefighter.
It offsets though, doesn't it, as opposed to coming in as income, I think.
Well, as long as it's captured somewhere.
Isn't it within the apprenticeship levy? It is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. So we don't see it as income. But yeah, good point, Brian.
It's
Yes.
£7,000 per student. But it as Lisa quite rightly says, the levy obviously we pay out as well, so it's offset.
So you won't see it coming in as an income stream.
Well,
No.
that depends on how much we pay in levy. So it's that there's
Yeah.
a percentage of our overall workforce that goes out in levy, doesn't it? So if you have more students come in than what your levy is, then it's an income. If you have less students than what your levy is, then it's a cost.
I think it's worth probably saying that the system is set up, so you're probably paying out more than you're getting back in.
I think
yeah.
you're probably right, Lisa. Yeah.
So it's working out at about 300,000 that firefighter apprenticeship cost and income.
I mean, I think, just a note on that. I think the whole apprenticeship levy situation, I think, is going to be re-looked at by the new UK government because, it hasn't worked in the way that it was expected to work by the previous government.
Yeah.
So not that I know anything particularly, but I have picked that note up because it needs to work, and apprenticeships are, a massive key to developing all sorts of services. This one in particular, but others as well.
Just bringing you back to that summary point, Lady Wilcox, there's 2.2 million of unbudgeted spend.
Yes.
There's only 1.7 of overspend. I say only.
Yeah.
To get in that. That's because of savings within the year of 495. So £500,000 is offsetting that. The overspends I touched on above will be, so the way that'll go to the way we'll fund it is 1.5 will come from the change management reserve.
Yeah.
That fits in with our transformation agenda.
Yeah.
425 for Firelink, that's coming from a reserve as opposed to the in-year budget, as we discussed. The same with equipment renewal, that's 140,000, and the joint control operating lease 100,000. That's exactly the same as what we did last year on our last point. Yeah, so that's how we are funding that overspend position.
Thank you.
So if I move you on to Appendix 1,
Yes.
and these are good for getting an overview and snapshot of what's happening. They give you the main categories of spending areas there, from employee costs down to income, and you can see in red there the overspend of 1.7.
Yeah.
And generally, when we move throughout the year, we'd have a different appendix 2, which would set out what the previous forecast was against the new forecast and what the why it's different. And that's important for us to track through. So in this case, appendix 2 gives us an overview of reserves. So we start in the year with 16.7 million. we look to be spending 2 million at this moment in time. If our transformation programme alters at all and costs us more, that figure is going to change accordingly. And you can see there's a downward trend on our reserves, which would be expected given the amount of funding that we are taking from there.
Yes.
So it goes from a general reserves of 3 million. It's expected for us as a fire and rescue service to hold a general reserve. It's a contingency allowance.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen, so that provides us with some operational resilience.
Yes.
For financial matters. We've got managed underspends, which are largely driven by departments. You've got your change management reserve there, which I just touched on.
Yeah.
That's going to pick up the bulk of transformation. Carbon reduction, equality and diversity, and equipment renewals. So you can see in equipment renewals, we started around the 2 million mark and we are whittling that down. Joint control, as I explained, is the last year to amortise that 100,000 into the in-year budget. And Firelink, the assumption is that we are paying that. So if we don't, it will stay in there. Appendix 3 gives you a grant overview. Probably the only thing I draw to your attention on this, Lady Wilcox, is that there are overspends on national pieces of work there. Not huge. There's 32 for national resilience. There's 22 for USAR. My view is on those national bits that we probably need to pull those back, those overspends. I'm not sure it's wholly appropriate unless it dovetails with something that operations are doing for us to be propping up national works there in that way.
Yes. Yeah, I think, national can get on with it a bit. I think, we need to focus on our own stuff.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I don't mean to directly contradict what I said at the beginning of the meeting about us
priorities
and and getting involved in or being aware of what happens nationally, but we need to prioritise our stuff. Didn't something come through yesterday about asking for people, some service update came through about asking for people to be involved in a national project?
Overseas assurance, group manager and station manager.
Yes, the Bermuda, that's it, yes.
Station.
I imagine there'll be a lot of interest in that, quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, but those are kind of, whilst one doesn't want to appear Scrooge like, I think we have to understand that we need to sort of get our own house in order. Okay, and that has to be the priority.
Yeah, I think for me, if we'd been breaking even on our budget or even underspending, provided there was a good reason for that, that would have been something we could have supported.
Yeah.
Given that we're in an overspend position, and this doesn't fall
plus all the other
within
stuff
our remit,
we've got.
I think perhaps we need to revisit that. And probably the reason this has run away from us is the person that we've got looking after grants hasn't been with us for a number of months now.
Surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the problems in the organisation, isn't it? There's, long-term sick, long-term absence for, that one person doing that. So it's about the resilience of the organisation.
Yeah. So we'll be picking that up, and hopefully by the next time I report to you, that will have altered. So this appendix 4 is the new appendix, Lady Wilcox, and that was put together by request, just to pick up the extras. And also we get a lot of requests for information about what this is costing, what that is costing.
Of course it is, because everybody wants to know the cost of everything.
Yes.
What they're not asking is, what improvements have been made, or the changes that are being implemented in order to make sure those improvements are made, or how things are going. Because, it's the old adage, that they want to know, the cost of everything, but actually the price or the value is not seen.
Two different things, cost and value.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I tried to do with Appendix 4 is answer all those questions without having to deal with them on an individual basis as and when they come into the service.
Yes, thank you. Stuart, I heard you.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. I just wanted to provide some sort of clarity in relation to the national resilience piece, because what happens with the national resilience, it's an asset for the whole of Wales, of course, and there's assets that that are split between Mid and West Wales, North Wales and South Wales. We have different appliances and equipment that fulfil the need of national resilience across the country. It is budgeted in its entirety, or should be budgeted in its entirety from Welsh Government through a fixed figure. Now that figure has remained constant for a large number of years now, about 13 years. That budget has remained fixed, which in real terms is clearly a cut as a result of pay rises and so on within the national resilience function nationally. However, this is managed through the National Resilience Governance Group, whereby there is recognition that there is probably savings to be made within the National Resilience Programme, which then will continue to make it self-sufficient for the future. There is a budget planning process in place, which means that at the end of the year, all of the costs of overspend should be met from savings within its own budget. North Wales Fire and Rescue Service hold the budget and get paid the money from Welsh Government. And obviously, for accounting purposes, Lisa records all of the incomings and outgoings from a South Wales perspective within our budget lines. But ultimately, I would hope, and I will go away and make sure that that it ends up being cost neutral to South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, because that's what the principle of it is, that ultimately the budget that's in place, that's provided from Welsh Government for national resilience assets, basically Welsh Government say, this is what we want you to achieve, or this is the outcomes that we want in terms of the types of responses. Over to you, three fire and rescue services, about how you then go away to deliver that. So we should be managing our assets within that national resilience budget and not stepping into individual sovereign services budgets. So there's certainly a piece of work for me to go away and make sure that, to put minds at rest, that we bring that back in line before the end of the financial year.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this sort of does what it says on the tin. It provides costs for commissioners since you've joined us. So last year and this year, it looks at earmarked reserve funding that has been pre-agreed. So there's, the salary costs up above that 86. There's three roles in there. We've just boxed off the 425 for premises related. That relates to Fire Link. We box off the 140 for supplies and services. That is for the equipment replacement programme, and the 100,000 is the joint control stuff. So those are the overspends from up above that are being funded through pre-agreed reserve arrangements. So there in the middle, we've got Welsh Government commissioners. That's the cost of commissioners. That's the cost of supporting commissioners as well. So, your staff network, which is minimal, you've got that in there. And then we've got the area that falls within our Director of Transformational Change, Dominic Mika, which is the transformational bit. And in there, we've got transformational salaries. So, we've got the director salary is project leads are in there, and also the cost of HMI.
Okay.
Additional service delivery will relate to transitional costs for the largest piece that's fallen out of the cultural review, and most of that relates to HR and the transition, the journey that HR are going on to support the service in meeting the recommendations from the Morris report. Mm-hmm. And they're all adding up to that 2.153 million. Mm-hmm. So we'll update that when we come to you, and I am told we've got everything that we've got at the moment, so I'm not expecting much more in there unless we have significant changes to the transformational programme.
Yeah, well, thank you for drawing this particular appendix up, because, we have nothing to hide. The costs are what they are. It's all been, Welsh Government appointed, Welsh Government approved. I would like them to be as open and transparent as we are, because we are absolutely just here to do the job for the time that we're here to do it. And, there isn't a nil cost.
No, there isn't. And I think this appendix may box off a number of inquiries for us.
Well, it's, it goes with the job, and the notion of transparency, that keeps getting flung back to us is, there we are. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, thank you so much. Is there anything further before we move on?
Just for the recommendation to revisit that, just to agree the contents of the report,
Yeah.
the movements in the budgets, and just for those things to be noted.
Okay, well, we've made plenty of discussion. We looked over this. Thank you very much to you and your team for preparing this. It's thorough. It gives us confidence that things are being monitored appropriately. So we note the report and agree it. And on to the other aspect, the capital monitoring report. So it's on page 27 of our pack. Thank you.
So this is the same approach as the revenue monitoring report. This is the first one for the year since budget setting.
Yeah.
And as you're aware, this is a much smaller piece, capital, because we don't receive funding for it. The capital budget is funded through borrowing by and large, some grant funding if we're lucky enough to secure it, a small injection of revenue budget, which sits around 200,000 a year, and any capital receipts that we can garner. Generally, that is from vehicle sales, and what we tend to do is ring fence that for the fleet engineer then to reinvest into our appliance and the long-term plan that we have for replacement. So there's appendix, there's a number of appendices there.
Yeah.
Appendix 1 provides an overview of the different schemes that are adding up to the budget. And of course, the capital budget is a bit different to the revenue budget in the way that it's got it ties into the previous year and the next year.
Yes.
Because the timescales for completing these capital projects are much longer.
Yeah.
For a property build, you're looking at 2.5 years. For fleet, you're looking at usually a minimum of 6 months, if not 9 months, to get what are quite complicated build processes in during the financial year.
Yes.
So Appendix 1 provides the budget information, and underneath it gives you a funding analysis of how we are paying for that.
Yeah.
In summary, we have 19 million budget for the year, and this is set against the outturn. So the slippage of 11.7 million, 1.4 million and 9.2 million respectively.
Yeah.
Appendix 2 provides some information on grant funding that we've been lucky enough to secure this year.
Yes.
The biggest elements from here are obviously things like new in. So the property team at the moment are
Still going on, is it?
It's still going on. We haven't got a shovel in the ground yet.
Mm-hmm.
That is due to happen. This is a complex project in terms of it's almost 2 in 1, because we've got a temporary accommodation that we need to make good for crews.
Yes.
We've got that in, what do I say? Marmalade.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Lady Marmalade.
Yeah.
Marmalade.
Marmalade.
So we have recently signed off the contract. That works are going to change the what our office space is into something that's fit for an operation crew. So that's the first piece that needs to be ready before we can decant crews from the existing station, and then we can start construction. So we've got updates there on the main piece. We've also got then another major project starting after Christmas in the form of Penarth, and that's quite similar in terms of we need temporary arrangements to decant crew and house crew for the whole life of that build. And that's quite unusual for the property team. We've never had 2 major builds on at the same time before.
Okay.
And there's an update on the on-call duty system as well there.
Yes. And all these, I mean, any project that we had in the council, there was always slippage.
Yeah.
So I'm not too concerned about it, because whatever they tell you it's going to be, it's always more. And however long they tell you it's going to be, it always takes longer.
It's going to be longer.
Okay.
I think we've got things in the system like planning permission, the complexities of the environmental impacts on that.
I blame the council planning departments for the
they're just uncontrollable, and so you've got large slippages there in terms of new in. Penarth, with work starting there in the new year. And the on-call is a piece of work that's still ongoing.
In all seriousness, I mean, you know, so New Inn, that's Torvine, Penarth, that's Vale Little Morgan, you know, these are all our constituent councils.
Yes.
And really, you know, if calls need to be made to the leaders or to the head of planning or whatever, you know, we should be working together. These are people that fund us.
Yes.
And they shouldn't be holding us up. And I don't know how aware planning officers in these constituent councils are. You know, if there are hold-ups, then what I'm saying is, you know, we should be working together. You know, there should be a partnership approach across the public services, particularly, you know, the awareness that actually, you know, you're another part of our council.
Yes.
So I don't know why there are hold-ups. They should, you know, we should be working smarter then.
Some of it is just ecology and biodiversity. So things like, you know, we had bats.
I was going to say the dormice. I mean,
things like that. You know, you've got to wait for a
I've
certain time in year
Yeah,
before you
yeah.
before you can evidence
Yeah,
something.
we had a lot of frogs in Newport. Yeah.
So it is things like that, and I think that, you know, previously with fire authority members, we would have tapped into the lead for that authority for them to sort of find out what the delay is. But that biodiversity ecology, it's very difficult to push ahead with. I think bats, apparently you can only take evidence that they are nesting about October, I think, every year.
Yeah, we can still tap in with, you know, without the fire authority, we can still tap in as the commissioners.
Yeah.
Because I can ring the leader of the council.
Yeah.
Or Kirsty can ring the leader of the council. You know, we don't need to deal with the monkeys now. We can deal with the organ grinders.
Okay, that's great.
So just let us know. You know, that's what I'm saying. You know, those what former fire authority members could do with the greatest respect. So, you know, anything I can do, I can do better. You know the song?
I won't sing it.
Okay.
So
Chief wants.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Stuart.
Just wanted to come in with a couple of points there. So completely concur with the fact that we should be working closely with our local authority partners. I think that the timing of some of these refurbishments is quite pertinent when we are about to embark on our journey around discussing with directors of finance and chief executives and leaders around next year's budget.
Yeah.
Because it's a really good selling point that we're investing in their local areas as well. It's not all around the capital cities, it's around the more rural communities, and it's something that they're getting back in terms of investment in their local authority. So I think it's something to sort of sell and consider in that regard. And then the other point that I wanted to mention is in the papers it refers to Monmouth and it says in blue co-location not confirmed. So obviously since this has been written, there's an update in that regard. The original concept or the original thinking was that there may well be an opportunity for a co-location with WAST. Having had a recent conversation with the chief executive of WAST, I think he's going to find it difficult to find the funding, and they've already decided now to go for a refurbishment of their element of the site in a lower cost approach. So that co-location is now off the table. So that's good in one way because it gives us some certainty and we can continue to plan in what we want to do rather than waiting for another agency. It's a shame in another way though, because co-located sites are always useful for joining more closely with our partners. But at least we have some certainty now that we can plough ahead, you know, as Lisa plans it into the future replacement programme and upgrade of our stations.
Yes. Thank you for that. So we've moved on then, so we can add that to the minutes. Thank you.
Just finalising the property piece, we've got 2 unbudgeted areas of spend that have popped up relating to Cardiff Gate decontamination project. So that has started and gained momentum during the summer, and we are looking at putting temporary facilities in place there to deal with the I don't know if I can still call it emerging contamination issue. It's been there for a while, isn't it?
Normal. It's not. It's a known issue that we've got to get on the front foot with.
Okay.
Yeah.
The two were on the back foot.
Again, quite a complex project because Cardiff Gate the infrastructure underground is not what we want it to be. Drainage isn't great. That was just fields before.
Yeah.
So it is presenting challenges, but we've got a plan of what we want there, and that's what we're aiming to deliver on. And then that will be part of a larger piece where we will look at contamination, and how that fits against the bigger portfolio. It's easy to do with new builds, isn't it? You know, the flow of things throughout the station, from when the crews come in from a call to how they clean themselves off and then stay safe and go back out. I think that's easy to do with a new build and a major refurb. What it's not so easy to do is with existing fire stations. We know our portfolio is quite old. Some of it's intuitive in terms of coming in and having showers right there when you get off a truck, you know, and being able to bag up your stuff. But some of it will need some thinking about, I think.
Chair, if I may, can I just
Yeah.
go on record to thank Lisa and her team, because the team of, you know, smaller team been up against it with property for shifting the Cardiff Gate project up to the top of the list, because
Absolutely.
it's very important for firefighter safety.
Oh,
So you know,
right.
they've really placed that at the front and centre in terms of shifting up, and I appreciate, you know, Cardiff Gate and
Yeah.
the team appreciates
Yeah.
what your team have done there.
Good. That's good to hear. Thank you. Because you know, one thing I've learned over the past 7 or 8 months is there's so much I didn't know about how firefighting operates, and why would I? Because, you know, but it's not as straightforward as anyone would think, is it? It's an extremely complex operation with so many different aspects to it, and they cost. You know, they cost. It's not like I was talking about the commissioners. You know, it's not a nil cost operation. If we want our public safety to be at the forefront, then, you know, it's going to be painful. And there we are.
Yeah, so that's the contamination work, the project at Cardiff Gate. That's going to be a growing piece of work against that property portfolio. And then the second piece then are drill towers. So there's 2 locations there to replace. Making an assessment of this, because it's not budgeted whether we go ahead or not. We've had the surveyors out, and the cost of the works to be done are so extensive that it's better just to get a new drill tower in. And to be honest, with Pontycymer, it was the first of our on-call package of stations. Why we didn't put a new drill tower in there first. I think on our visit, you come down to Pontycymer with the chief and Carl, and we did a walk around the Pontycymer station.
Yes, when I actually found Pontycymer, which was that was. I think that was a test, you know.
I think the chief made an observation that the drill tower at the time was looking a little bit tired, and I think off the back of that we got an inspection in of all of them, and we weighed up the cost of doing these remedial works, and it is just we've got a contract now for Crofton Towers. They are between 90 and 100,000 depending on which you have. They're working very well for our crews at the moment. We're having some good feedback from them.
Yes, yeah.
Very weather worn, and I think it's just part of updating that provision for training on station.
Future fit as well, I think that's the
Yeah.
bit.
And we don't get nesting birds in them, which is
No.
Do you not get them in there?
Stuart?
Yeah, so I was just going to come in and make the observation that the traditional drill tower was a brick-built, very expensive structure that sort of was very limited in terms of its usage and what you could pitch ladders and you could test your ladder skills and so on. But these days, you know, using different construction and multi-purpose units, which enable you to use different types of ladders, enable you to use rescue techniques, enable you to use all different uses, it becomes a far more beneficial asset for a very similar or even cheaper cost than it would have been traditionally. So I think that there's a lot of good work there to not only look to replace, but look to replace with what is state of the art and fit for the future.
Well, I'm trying my best to get out of central London on a Thursday, which isn't easy. One of the shortcuts I use, I cut through Chelsea and I end up right in front of Chelsea Fire Station on the King's Road. There's the traffic lights there. And I look at the tower and I think, I know what that is now. And I didn't know that 7 months ago, but there we are. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Moving on to the vehicle piece. So our investment in vehicles is subject to the confines of the vehicle replacement programme that is developed by the fleet engineer, sorry, Chris Tenby, and that's a 10-year look at the age and the condition of our fleet. So he plans that out, and that's what informs our annual budget.
Okay.
So we looking at that piece, I've got a narrative there. We've got a number of overspends, but they're nothing to worry about because all of them, they come to just shy of £1 million. They are grant funded.
Good.
And the other pieces are just due to the length of time between ordering and actually getting delivered.
Okay.
It's just the indexation of prices upwards.
Yes. Well, they're not going to go down, are they?
No, that's what we tend to find. I think with we're working with the fleet engineer to get orders in quite quickly for the financial year because of the chief spoke about it earlier, the long time spans and the very, very narrow marketplace for our water ladder builders.
Basically.
It's a very, very small market. So at best, it would take a minimum of 26 weeks to get a fire appliance in.
Okay.
At best.
Yeah.
So
6 months.
yeah, so building in sort of inspection, if there's a change in stowage or an issue in the supply chain of getting this stuff in, that will add to that. So if we wait until the start of the financial year to place an order, we're not going to get it until around October time. So we probably need, with our 10-year plan, we can look at placing orders for the new financial year.
Yes.
If we're all in agreement by December, January each year, now we can get them in.
Yes.
And we are caught up with our vehicle replacement programme now. So our aim was to get our average appliance life down from 18 years, that was the average life, down to 12. I think it was doing a number of things for us. We were dealing with the Euro 6 requirements so that we were becoming less dirty, and you know, the impacts on the environment. And I think that we are nearly there yet. So I'll get an update on that for you next time.
Thank you.
So just to add to the issues in relation to vehicles or fire appliances, I think it's probably useful just to provide an overview about how a fire appliance is purchased for the layperson, I suppose, because you don't buy an off-the-shelf product with a fire engine. You buy a chassis that comes from whichever manufacturer makes those chassis, and obviously we have a preference in South Wales right now through the procurement process, and it's already as part of that procurement. But the timelines that Lisa's talked about are often limited by the access to those chassis from the large scale companies like the Volvos, like the Mercedes, like the big companies.
Yeah.
It's about getting that chassis in. So then when that chassis arrives in the country, it ends up going up to Scotland, and that's where the coach builders are. So all of the back of the appliance, all of the lockers, all of the stowage, everything that around where ladders go, all of the electronics, that all gets added up in Scotland because that's the company that've got the contract right now, company called E1. And so then they take their time to build all of that, and then ultimately it gets packaged and delivered. So I think that Lisa's 6-month window that she describes is on a good day. I think certainly after Brexit we were up to 18 months and sort of slipping over certainly beyond the 12-month period. So if we're back down to 6 months now, that's wonderful. But yeah, it has been longer than that, which has always been a challenge in terms of the flipping between 2 financial years from putting in orders to actually accepting delivery. And I know that Lisa's, what she's done in terms of putting reserves in place to enable that going forward has been really helpful in South Wales. But yeah, that just want to give a bit of context about the complexities of fire engines. It's a small market. These big companies, they provide vehicles for hauliers, for you know, other bigger markets than the fire sector. It is a very small sector, so we're sort of the poor relation there. We need to make sure we get our orders in plenty of time as part of that replacement programme, so that we're not playing catch up with other competitors to the market.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting explanation, Stuart. Thank you. It just reminds me when I put my order in for Porsche and they said 3 months and it turned into 9. So you know, but they take your deposit. But interesting to see it. So it comes in and then it's built. Yeah, good. And I again a layperson's question. So do you have a different spec for per brigade?
You would like to think, wouldn't you, that a fire engine was a fire engine across the country?
Yeah.
It certainly isn't.
Okay.
Every fire and rescue service has its own little nuances and its own preferences. What we've tried to do in Wales is we've tried to standardise a suite of options for Wales as part of an all Wales procurement process. What that gives us is a smaller number of options rather than it being, you know, completely bespoke and everything different. It's a smaller number of options to choose from in Wales, where there's a sort of a small appliance, a medium appliance, and a large appliance, depending on what the local arrangements are in terms of road width and whether in a city or whether in a rural community. But ultimately, that was all done as part of the procurement process for Wales. So the Wales appliances are, you know, relatively standard, but across the UK, then they are very, very different. And I suppose that one of the things that we've had to, in this round of procurement, have had to work in is the fact that the contaminants issue has meant that we wanted to try to move towards a clean cab solution. So changes within to try to make sure that we don't have the BA sets back in the fire engine after there's been a fire. We don't have kit back in the fire engine after there's been a fire, because historically we'd come out of a fire in our fire kit and our BA sets, and we'd all get in the cab together and travel back to the fire station. Whereas today, knowing what we now know around contaminants, then we need to maintain a clean cab. So therefore, we make sure that we provide for that. So that's required some design changes to lockers and so on. So moving forward, we will, as we remove vehicles from our fleet, all of our vehicles will move towards that clean cab solution. There's obviously interim solutions that have been put in place for the vehicles that are the older vehicles, but ultimately over time that will be designed out.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. Thank you very much. Lisa, anything further now, please?
So you've got two smaller pieces. I'd say 80% of the capital budget is made up with the property and the vehicle replacement investment.
Yes.
So they are the key asset pieces in all of this. A lesser point is ICT infrastructure, and an area that's come in more recently is our investment in frontline operational equipment, and these are really big pieces. We're not talking about a 50 to £100,000 piece. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Okay.
So these two pieces, equipment and ICT, are much smaller, you will see.
Yes.
There's 175 projected to be spent for operational equipment.
Yeah.
That is PPV vans, DIM equipment and MTA, and you've got the full explanation of that terminology there.
Yes.
There is an overspend of 130,000. Again, we've got grant funding coming in to offset that.
Okay.
So we've just taken the opportunity to capitalise on what's available from Welsh Government partners.
Yes.
And then ICT, that's a really important piece for us in terms of developing our communications and digital sort of provision, and pushing the service forward really in terms of modernising us. So we are keen to keep investment here. It's quite a small piece. This year, 243,000 to be spent.
Yeah.
The biggest element of that is the all the back office sort of systems like NetScaler, wireless access points and stuff like that.
Now, while I don't, I'm not an expert in any sense of the word in terms of ICT, but what I have seen and what I've used here as an end user, certainly in the office functions, not in the operational functions of firefighters, but in terms of ICT, I find the system overly complex. So I would be very happy to see that we are drilling down into seeing actually what we need and what is useful and what is modern and what other people are doing in this space in order to modernise and to make it easier to use, more effective, less complicated, up to date, without it costing money.
That's going to be impossible, that.
Okay. But I think, again, let's see what partners do. Let's see, local authorities are operating stuff all the time. I remember a meeting we had when Geraint was still in post, and he talked about us moving towards the same system as councils use.
Mod.gov.
Modern.gov. that's
Yeah,
it.
and that was for our live streaming, wasn't there? These meetings.
Yeah.
You don't want to say anything on that, Wayne, do you? Or Cal? No?
So I can come in if it helps. So it's a great point that you raised, Lady Wilcox, because there's lots of systems that operate independently of each other that could potentially talk to each other and pre-populate. I think that where we are as a sector is that, again, we're a victim of being a small player in terms of the marketplace, and so often we end up purchasing systems which are generic, rather than something that's bespoke for the organisation. I think that moving forward, that then working with across the sector, so that we can sort of have the economies of scale of developing systems, in partnership with other colleagues around the country, will give us a better opportunity. I think that where we'll pick up on this is through the digital transformation programme that we've set up as part of our transformation work. So there'll be dedicated work around digital transformation moving forward. I think that there's lots of opportunities to go through business processes over time. I think what tends to have happened is you've had a paper-based system that's been overly complex, and rather than going through a business process exercise to simplify, we just move the paper-based process into an electronic system, and that is not a criticism of South Wales. I think that's just something that happens has happened across the workplace over many years. That we've developed an ICT-based system that is basically a replication of the paper-based system, when it could potentially be a lot more efficient, effective, slicker, as you've described. So I think this work will be picked up as part of the digital transformation programme moving forward.
Yes, that's really good to hear. And again, it's just an example of me bringing fresh eyes to it. That's all. That's part of our remit. Okay.
In summary, we've got a forecast spend of 11.7 million. We started the year with a budget of 19. There's a lot. The biggest piece of that is station slippage into the new year. Yeah. So there's some big figures there: 5.5 million for New Inn, 2 million for Penarth. That's what's adding to that reduced forecast. So against that spend, then we got slippage of 9.2 going into 25-26, and we've got a 1.4 million pound overspend. And there's a table there that gives you a breakdown of how we intend to manage that overspend. Yeah. We've got some grant funding coming in over 1 million. We've got underspends in other areas that we're going to use to service that, and there is just shy of 300,000 that we need to pick up ourselves. The largest elements of that, of course, being items I've already touched on. Cardiff Gate decontamination has been something that we chose to tackle during the year. Drill towers I've mentioned, and water ladders, and that's just indexation of prices going up on contracts. And that brings us to the end of the capital monitoring report. So you're updated on all the schemes, on the financial position, and you were already aware from that investment and that borrowing that we do to undertake that investment, the financing costs of that, so the MRP, minimum revenue provision, statutory payments, they all move through the revenue monitoring report. So, the capital and the revenue budgets are inextricably linked in that sense. You put more into your capital budget, you've got more financing costs in your revenue budget. Yes. Fine if you've got the money, but if you're feeling the squeeze elsewhere, you need to be aware of those things. Yes, indeed. Okay, so I've just got one further point on this, that in order to pick up something that we talked about earlier, engaging our local authority partners, I would now expect going forward that every time we open a new facility or a refurbed facility, that an invitation is sent to the leader of the council, where that is located, to invite him or her to the opening, and or any cabinet members, local councillors, so on and so forth. That should be de rigueur going forward. We've got a process in place for that, and sometimes we've got they might not come, they might not turn up, but so we invite the mayor's work, but invite the leader, and then he or she can decide whether it's a mayoral event or not. But it's the leader of the council is the focus. And just again for information, I don't know if colleagues are aware that
Yesterday on Wednesday, actually, a new leader was appointed at Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council.
Yes.
So because the authority has now moved from an independent authority to a Labour-run authority, and it's Councillor, is it Brent Clark?
Yes.
Yes. There we are. So just for note, just to show you I'm on the ball and I read the papers when I'm home in Wales. There we are. Lisa, thank you, and thank you, team. Two excellent projects, the revenue and the capital monitoring report in finite detail. I can see where we're going, the public can see where we're going. Before I close it, are there any further comments from anyone, please? Okay, in that case, the commissioners note the budget, progress of the capital schemes, and approve alterations identified in Appendix 1 and associated movements in funding.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and point 8, the annual treasury management review. It's on page 39 of the pack.
I'll keep this brief, Lady
Thank you.
Wilcox. So
Quite brief.
the annual treasury management review looks at all the financing arrangements that we put in place to deliver the capital investment that we've just spoke of in
Yes.
in the previous budget report. So this report, it's one of 3 statutory reports
Yes.
that'll come to board each year.
Yeah.
Report 1 is called a treasury management strategy statement. That needs to come for sign off before the start of the financial year, and you did that in March this year. Yeah, so that's the first one. The second one is a review report that needs to be reported to commissioners before the 31st of December each year.
Yes.
And then after the financial year closes, we need to bring to you a annual treasury management outturn or review report, which tells you what happened last year, how did we finish the year,
Yeah.
were we within our thresholds and the limits that we set in the strategy. So those are the 3 main dates.
Yeah.
So strategy before the 31st of March,
Yeah.
review before the 31st of December,
Yeah.
and outturn before the 30th of September. And this is what this report is doing for you.
Yeah.
It's giving you a review of the 23-24 financial year. It will revisit limits set by the 23-24 strategy, and it seeks to tell us, did we breach them or not? And it sets out some compliance terminology in there. I can tell you that it didn't. I'm very happy to tell you that it didn't. It gives some information then on our borrowing outturn.
Yeah.
Our net book rate of borrowing is very low at 3.94%.
Yeah.
Of course, as we mentioned, new borrowing will be at a much higher rate.
Yes.
That may need to be done this year, but hopefully they will teeter off by the time that comes after Christmas. So it does some comparison there on this year's rate in comparison to last year's. Interest on our borrowing in any one year, we've got about 26 million in borrowing on our net book. That's not the most we've ever had. We've hit as much as 40. So that's what's on our loan book, 26 million. That comes in as £1 million around about in the region of every year we pay £1 million of interest. That's without any minimum revenue provisional payments that we put through the budget. So that's the borrowing bit. The investment bit then is saying what we did in the year in terms of investments. We know rates were much higher this time last year, and we enjoyed some return from
Yes.
2 investments at £2 and £3 million each, and the rates are set there. If I just take you on to the main piece of Appendix 1, it's got the prudential indicators. The key one being capital spending. We can see that we budgeted for just shy of 15 million. We spent 7 million, and that would have been the reasons for that change would have been reported in the revenue monitoring report during the year. Underneath there, we've got how we finance that. And we set limits around that. Our limits are driven by what we say we're going to go into invest in capital. So we've got limits in terms of borrowing, operational and a legal limit, and then we've got the CFR limit. And what that does for us is says it ties in with this concept of prudential borrowing. If you are investing X amount of money, then you only need to borrow this amount of money. If you go over that, which is what the CFR indicator is, that can point to bigger issues in terms of having to borrow to run your service.
Yeah.
Now, we know that we get fire levy from our 10 unitary authorities to run our service, so we shouldn't be borrowing to pay for running costs. And that's the key,
Yes.
that's the crux of the CFR.
Because if you start doing that, you're in trouble.
Yes, so this presents that we're in an under borrowed position, so we haven't utilised all our borrowing capacity.
Yeah.
So we're under by just around 13 million, and it provides some information there on our limits, confirms that we haven't breached that.
Yes.
So our financing costs as a proportion of our net revenue stream is 5.32%. And it gives an overview there of our borrowing debt books.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's it really, Chair,
Yeah.
unless you have any questions.
No, I mean, you know, for me, what this report is a detailed account of following all the, not guidelines, but all the statutory aspects of running a public service, to make sure that we are in line with Welsh Government and indeed with, you know, wider government activities, and that we are doing things properly. Okay, that's very, very good to know. And according to SIPFA, who I was their guest speaker at one of their conferences, and goodness knows what I said, because I don't think I understood a word of it, but it happened at the end anyway. So there we are. Okay, so the recommendation is that the Commissioners note the annual Treasury Management Review for 2023 and approve the actual prudential and Treasury indicators set therein. So approved.
Thank you.
Okay, and finance team restructure. Stuart, over to you on page 47 of our pack.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'll pick up this, and then obviously Lisa will fill in any gaps that I missed, because I think when it was first down for me to deliver this, then Lisa wasn't going to be in a previous meeting, so that's why it's got my name by it. But ultimately, I think it's probably pertinent for me to pay tribute, I suppose, to the work that's gone on within the finance team in a very, very difficult environment with lots and lots of highly complex work being produced by a very small number of people. And
I concur fully, and so do the other commissioners.
And so when we're in a situation where those people choose to move on to other opportunities elsewhere, then that puts even more pressure on the people that remain. And I think what we've tried to provide here is a proposal to revisit, and it's an ideal opportunity when there is vacancies within a team for us to consider a soft restructure that may provide a better, more resilient team for the future. And so the paper seeks to describe where those challenges lie and what the proposals are to try to resolve that. I think that where we have a situation where we have a very small number now with people leaving of qualified accountants, we need to make sure that that skill set and that ability is maintained for the future for ongoing resilience. So the paper provides an overview about where the current structure is, but ultimately identifies that the proposed structure will have a very much more clearly differentiated sort of tiers or routes through to provide a better balance between the management accountant side of the structure in section 3.3 and the financial accountancy work streams. And that also shows that there's potential routes for progression and where we have the opportunity to grow our own talent at apprentice level, potentially moving through as they develop into these positions so that we have long-term resilience in our accountancy processes as people improve their qualifications and grades as they go through, and ultimately that we're able to, in the short term, attract people into posts at an appropriate grade to compete with the market outside of the fire and rescue service, to bring those people in who have those qualifications, those skills and the expertise to be able to hit the ground running and enable the function to continue to run as effectively as it has under Lisa's leadership. I think that we have undertaken a benchmarking exercise across Wales to examine ourselves against the other two fire and rescue services. And I think for an organisation with the budget of our size, we are not necessarily as well resourced as other organisations are. And so the ask here and the recommendations for commissioners is that they approve a £33,000 increase to base budget to support any additional salary costs as a result of a soft restructure within the financial team, and approve the immediate implementation of this plan to restructure the team, as I said, in a bid to continue to function effectively and enable us to meet our statutory reporting deadlines from a financial perspective, but also to provide that ongoing resilience for the team so that they can continue to function now and into the future. Is there anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
No, I think you've captured it all, Chief. Thank you very much.
Okay, Stuart, thank you so much. What all I would add, along with the view of the commissioners, is that we are pleased to see this. We hope that this will begin to redress the issues in a small team that has has to produce significant amounts of work. And I would say that if I'd like some kind of red light put in somewhere. So if this proposal isn't working or doesn't work as quickly as we need to, that we revisit it quickly to find another solution, because it is very clear that this is an area of need. It's an extremely important area for the organisation. And so if this solution works, then fine. But if we find it isn't working, do not wait. Okay? Speed is of the essence. Let us know it isn't working and we'll revisit it and see what else we need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Okay, so the commissioners agreed with the 33k increase in the base budget to support additional salary, and the commissioners approved the immediate implementation of the plan to restructure the finance team, with the further comments noted that if there needs to be a revision quickly, let's get on with it. Let's not waste time on this, because, if we don't know how many beans we've got and bean counters, then we've had it.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Lady Wilcox. And just to highlight, I think our next finance and audit meeting is taking place in December the 13th. I'm probably only going to be able to give you a portion of these reports because of the gaps that we've got. So even if we go out today to advert, it's probably unlikely we're going to get anybody in until December, Christmas time. So, I hate to say that in terms of not furnishing you with the information that you
No, Lisa, but that's an honest awareness, and we'd much prefer that to know where we are at, rather than kind of last minute excuses or revisions. So everyone, including the public, are completely aware of where we're at. So thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. So I think we move on to you now, Wayne, don't we, for Audit Wales? Certificate of compliance. That's on page 53 of our pack.
Yes, thank you. This is a very short agenda item. This is just for information, and it's hopefully for reassurance. Every year, obviously, the Fire and Rescue Service produces an annual improvement plan in line with the local government measure 2009. This certificate has come from Audit Wales as a result of the plan we published in October, 31st October 2023. So Audit Wales undertake a review to appreciate whether the plan we've produced is in line with and is compliant with the expectations of the Act. The certificate itself is around the fact that the service has to ensure in the plan we talk about continuous improvement, that we make significant arrangements to undertake our improvement objectives, and that we look at performance and the performance standards that we are committing to going forward. So that is what this certificate is. I think it's very timely. Obviously, we're bringing the next plan to the Board of Commissioners in October, early October, prior to publication. So this is a certificate of compliance for last year's plan. So that was just for information, really, and for note.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we get an even better tip from Adrian Compton for the next one. Okay, because we are all working very hard to ensure that that is as good as it can be. So I note that. Do I bring Steve in at any point? For...
Not to this agenda item. No,
No.
this is from Audit Wales. It's just it's a standard annual certificate of compliance, really. But,
Okay.
I'm happy if Steve wants to.
Because I noticed he's been sitting there quietly throughout all these deliberations. So, Steve, I don't know if you'd like to comment on anything, but you're very welcome to engage at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Lady Wilcox. Audit Wales are the external auditors. They're separate to tiered internal auditors, so it's their piece of work. So I couldn't comment on the work that they've done.
That's okay. All right. I didn't want you to feel left out.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So then that's noted. Thank you very much. And point 11, performance report, strategic performance indicators. That's on page 55. Matt, please.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. Again, obviously, the ask from this report is obviously for commissioners to note strategic performance indicators for Q1 24-25. I think there's some positive things that we've got within amongst this. What I'll do with the report, if Lady Wilcox, you're happy with that, I'll give you the key headlines and some of the rationales where we're seeing the reductions and the work that's being done for what we're seeing in some of the increases in our statistics across the organisation as well then. So obviously I'll take you to page 2, which is point 2.3. And the positive factor is the total number of fires attended during Q1 was lower than the number attended during the same quarter last year. And it's also, which is positive, lower than the projected outcome.
It's significantly lower, isn't it? 1,360 as opposed to 2,212. That's
and I think for us,
significant.
It certainly is. And I think what we're seeing is the positive work that's been undertaken across the organisation with risk reduction, engagement and collaboration through partnerships, etc. as well. And I think obviously that again is going to continue with the work that's projected for January as well, with the unwanted fire signals project as well.
Okay, well, interested to, we're going to do a lot of monitoring on that, aren't we?
Yes, so I'll touch on that as I come through this now, which leads me to 2.4 really. And again, with this is where now we've seen an increase. So obviously the total number of false alarms attended during Q1 was higher than that attended during the same quarter last year, albeit not a significant number, but we are seeing it and it's projected to be higher than our projected amount as well. And again, what we're seeing is that's about a 2% above the projection of Q1. And this is down to mainly, Lady Wilcox, around faulty apparatus. We've seen that as about a 20% increase in that. Also purpose-built flats, which is an increase of 15% of false alarms, and hospitals and residential homes, with a significant one in residential homes of 45%.
And that is because of faulty...
Would be all linked to faulty activation. It can be linked to obviously cooking, etc. as part of that. It's a blend across things, but they obviously are key categories. But again, going forward now, we should see that reduction. But the work isn't stopping with the positive work happening with our crews, the education, the business fire safety teams. We're still maintaining to work around that education as we move forward. So again, as we move into 2.5, the total number of road traffic collisions attended in Q1 was lower than that attended last year with a good reduction, but it is higher than the projected amount.
Anything about the 20 mile an hour?
So I was just coming on to that, Lady Wilcox, is around that 30 to 20 mile an hour. We've also seen the publication at the start of August from the Welsh Government around that 23% reduction across Wales in deaths and injuries within these areas. So we do think that's the work that's ongoing, but also as well, I'm confident with the collaborative work with our community safety, our operations teams that are doing with communities, the police and other agencies. We are seeing that, especially for the educations within schools as well. So again, while we're seeing it, that reduction is there and we'll continue to conduct that work in our services. Now, as I move on to 2.6, this is where we've seen obviously our special service calls, which I'll then go into a bit deeper now. And again, our special service calls attended during Q1 is lower than the number attended last year, and it's lower than the projected outcome. I think that's a real positive thing, and we have seen some increases, and I'll just come to them now.
But for the for the requirements of the member of the public, other special service calls are,
So basically, what we're looking at special service, so it could be anything from animal rescue, it could be bariatric, it could be fallers, it can be obviously there's road traffic collisions in amongst there as well. Certain ones, but assisting ambulance and assisting other agencies,
okay,
which I'll give more detail on. I think the positive thing for us is we've seen this reduction from the challenge now that's coming from our control rooms. So where our control room is challenging certain calls,
okay,
but also as well duty group managers within the tactical rota. So they are governing this and questioning it more before our resources are allocated to any
Okay.
incidents to
okay,
ensure that we are the right agency to be
okay,
attending to offer the right care, respect to those individuals.
all right.
Now, what we have seen is a 3% increase in assisting other agencies.
Mhm.
So that would fall with the ambulance, etc., and police.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But again, calls originating from ambulance services increased by 12% within this. Now,
Okay,
what I am pleased to say, there's a lot of work going on with that.
Yeah.
The CFO has asked me to look at something which we have done, which is around the amount of calls and the reason for these calls
Yeah.
for assist ambulance. There's work done that, and the CFO has met with the CEO of the Welsh Ambulance Service, and I
Yeah.
know there's positive work going on with that. So I'd like to
Yeah.
think we'll start to see plateau with this as we move forward, as part of it then.
I was going to come to you then, Stuart, because I remember we have mentioned this before, haven't we, about, I think particularly to do with bariatric assistance, but wider than that for Welsh Ambulance Service. So I welcome your comments.
Yeah, I was going to come in when Matt finished, but I'll do it now. So the couple of bits and pieces in relation to what he said. I'll start with the ambulance service stuff, as that's what we're talking about right now. The increase in numbers of incidents. Obviously, I've spoken to lots of people on fire stations up and down the length and breadth of South Wales, and they've anecdotally told me about some frustrations that they've been having in relation to the numbers of incidents. Not that they shouldn't be going to these incidents, but they'd like to know. They'd like to have a clear and accurate picture of what they're being turned out to, and that hasn't, from their perspective, always been the case. They feel like what they're getting on the turnout sheet when they actually get to the incident is something very different. And so that's the focus of the piece of work that I've asked Matt to look at, where we've spoken to the workforce and asked them to feed in the occasions where that happens. I've touched on that subject with the chief executive of WAST, and I've given him some examples to look at in the short term. And Matt is going to bring together a fuller piece of work where all of that is collated, so that I can then present that to the chief executive of WAST, so that I say we're not pushing back and saying that we don't want to help another agency, but what we are doing is saying that we want our crews to be prepared mentally when they arrive at the incident, so that they are, all of the pre-planning work that goes on whilst en route can be an appropriate and effective use of their time, so they're not sort of caught on the back foot when they get there. So I think that's a really valuable piece of work that we're working through, as well as then wider discussions nationally around broadening of the role and where that moves to in the fullness of time. So yes, there certainly is a part to play, I think, for firefighters to assist our colleagues in WAST, but it is something to be mindful of, and actually sometimes increasing call numbers isn't a negative. It's a positive that we're actually adding value in the space, and we are providing more value for money for the public, and ultimately providing greater degree of visibility of our staff in the communities that we serve. So as I say, we can't always think of increased numbers as being negative. Clearly the incidents are happening, and we're there to provide support to them. I think one of the other things I wanted to highlight, that one of the earlier points that Matt raised, was in relation to the numbers of fires attended, and we talked about the good work that goes on within our community safety teams and education teams to prevent fire. I guess that's part of the thing that, but I would be reluctant to celebrate too much the reductions being as a complete result of that. I think that where we do experience things, seasonal weather extremes that are cyclical in terms of fuel loadings play a part in this. We've had and I'm touching wood as I say this, we've had a good year this year in relation to wildfires, and that's as a result of the fact that the fuel loading that takes sort of time to build up after having previous years of really bad numbers of wildfires, that fuel loading is now at a low level, and this comes in cycles as the fuel then grows and the vegetation drops, and then starts to rot, and that creates more fuel loading, and it takes a number of years to build that back up, and then you're back in the same problem. So there's some things in nature which help us. Every now and then you have a good year, and we're in that space right now where we've had really wet and drab and horrible sort of start to the year. And then obviously that sort of cyclical process around wildfires has an impact in numbers. And there's other things, other incidents, not necessarily fires, but other incidents where, flooding and those kinds of things, flash flooding and inland water rescues and so on. Then that's very much weather dependent. So lots of stuff, we have control over, and we can continue to provide prevention activities, and we have some success, and we really do have some success. It's not to take away from the good work that goes on there, but there is lots of stuff which is also just happens, and we have to respond to that. So those are a couple of points I just wanted to tease out, really.
Thank you, thank you, Chief. While you were talking, I was thinking of, I'll never get over seeing Taft Street in Pontypridd flooded. A street that's familiar to so many of us, and to see that was so unexpected. To see people being pulled along in boats there. I think King came down to see it. I think it was so shocking afterwards.
That said, I mean, I touched on wildfires, and what I wouldn't want to do as well is for people to think that because these things are cyclical, we sort of sit on our hands, because we don't. We do lots of good work with landowners, with to manage the land appropriately, to take away that fuel where we can. So there are things which happen in nature that we try to intervene with as well. So there's lots of good prevention work going on. But as I say, I don't think we can. Evaluation of things that don't or haven't happened is really difficult, isn't it? I think that as a sector, we wrestle with that. We try to evaluate the reason for a reduction, and you're trying to sort of provide an explanation for something that hasn't happened. So that's really difficult, but it clearly has a part to play, and our prevention activity clearly does have a benefit in that regard.
Thank you very much, Matt. Where are we at?
I'll continue on. Thank you, Chief. So basically, 2.7. Again, the total number of deaths and injuries arising from all fires, quarter one, was higher than the number recorded in the same quarter last year, but it's lower than the projected outcome. And again, then the same for the number of deaths and injuries arising from all fires, which were started accidentally, was higher than the number recorded during the same quarter last year, and the same as the projected for the outcome as well.
It's still awful though, isn't it?
It's a terrible, difficult thing, and again, it's as the Chief's alluded to with other stuff, it is a very difficult thing for us to keep up with. But we are always trying to do our best with it, trying to get the most up-to-date information, working with those greatest at risk within our communities. And obviously we are mindful that we are dealing with now an ever increasing ageing communities.
Wales is an ageing population, yes.
So it's a very challenging thing from there, but we've seen obviously that 56% increase taking us from 9 to 14. But I think there is the positives as well, that there was no fatalities from fire compared to one last year at the same quarter. There was one serious injury this year compared to 3 last year. And again, then there were 13 slight injuries compared to 5 last year. So we have seen that as well. And obviously fatalities and injuries and accidental fires is up from 8 to 13. So that's 63% increase. But again, crews, community safety, etc., are continuing to work to address this matter as we go as the organisation. And again, then leading me on to the final part, and the percentage of dwelling fires which we can find within the rule of origin. The positive thing there, the quarter one was higher than during the previous reported year, but lower than the projected figure. Myself and ACF Loader have been working now with our stats department to develop a piece of work to bring back a paper to yourselves as a board of commissioners to understand this better as an organisation, these spreads. And I think one of the other things that we've seen as an early indicator is how our crews are recording the outcomes of these incidents. So there's a piece of work going on to obviously re-engage and retrain our crews as part of that then. So it is there then. But in relation to the contained to the room of origins as well, we have seen there's a 2% lower projection that was projected. Merthyr Tydfil has the highest percentage, with 100% of fires contained in the room of origin, and Bridgend has the lowest then. So we are looking deeper into this data to have a better understanding of it then.
Yeah.
To actually why this is occurring. That's it from me, Lady Wilcox. Again, these reductions now will link and be captured within the positive work being undertaken by our operational crews,
Yes.
departments, and these will be obviously populated within the community risk management plans of every station across the operations directorate.
Yes, yes, yeah. Interesting on that last point, the difference between Merthyr and Bridgend, because again, that was a point that was picked up by the new health minister this morning on his interview with BBC Radio Wales about getting all the health authorities to pick up on good practice. So, you know, in a microcosm, it would be good for, you know, all our stations to ensure that everybody's doing the right things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that last point there in relation to confined to room of origin, in terms of the differences and so on. I think that as you'll know, Lady Wilcox, the thematic review of operational effectiveness that's just recently been shared in terms of draft with yourselves from the fire advisor picks up on this very point, and it picks up on the training, the techniques, the operational techniques that have been prevalent in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, without any direct criticism of South Wales, although the issue is in place in South Wales. There is processes in place and operational practices which may well be contributing to fires moving beyond the room of origin. So the recommendations from that report will be welcomed and will be taken into our operational practices moving forward, in a bid to create that uniformity across the service and make sure that we are as effective as we possibly can be in extinguishing fires and adding value to the community. So it's all linked, isn't it? It's almost like it's planned, but yeah, all these things are linked together. So we'll make sure that we take cognizance of those recommendations and improve our training provision and operational tactics in a bid to respond to the things that data tells us also. And, you know, just for reference to show that I have indeed read and absorbed that report, there was something to do about the size of hoses. Yeah? Yes, so that's in relation to flow rates of water and tactics that are deployed. I think that in relation to confined to room of origin, when you have an oxygen controlled fire and you sort of leave the door open and add additional oxygen into that compartment, then it moves beyond that compartment and develops. So there are things that have been identified from incident reports that mean that we can improve. And as I said, it's not a criticism of staff in South Wales. It is something which takes place across the country, and ultimately, I think that the way I'm looking at this report, although it may be difficult reading for some, I think what way I'm looking at it is it will put South Wales in a position to be the best in the country in terms of our operational tactics and the approaches that we take to resolve operational incidents. And I think others, from conversations I've had with colleagues outside of Wales, they're looking at this as something that they are wanting to move in the direction of also. Good. Well, you know, again, but commissioners will look in detail at the report and will have a substantive replies to aspects of it when it is finally published. But thank you for that. Okay, so the commissioners note the services strategic performance indicator total, so Q1. Yep, thank you very much. And forward work programme, Stuart. Thank you, Lady Wilcox. So, in the past, we've had to sort of make some amendments and updates as a result of some slippage. But I'm pleased to say that we were looking at the dates that we covered. I think that was. So I'm pleased to say. I think we're back on track now. I think Gabby's all over this now, to the position where what you see in the agenda item 12 doesn't need much explanation, really. The things that are for the September meetings have been talked about, and therefore the forward work plan is now an accurate reflection of what comes next. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, and we can see
what we have to do for all the other things. Yep, all there. Thank you very much. So my final invite to Steen before I close the meeting. Is there anything that you need to remind us of or comment on, Steen, as you've observed the meeting?
Nothing in terms of the meeting, just to give you an update, I guess, in terms of where we are with the planning. So the planning is ongoing. We've got a number of orders that have kind of kicked off over the last few weeks in terms of the field work, and we'll be looking to bring more reports, obviously, to you as final for the next meeting in December. But those conversations are ongoing in terms of the planning. So just to update you on that, really. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attendance. In fact, thank you all for your attendance. I don't have any items of business that I deem urgent. Just to thank you all again for your attendance. Thank Lisa and the finance team for the reports that have been compiled, and to others who have noted what we're doing, particularly our strategic performance indicators, to see that we're on track. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.